Hello, and welcome to my intercultural communications research project. My name is Paul Figueroa, and in this communications research project, I went ahead and interviewed someone named Christopher Adam. I chose this person to interview because they are a young independent individual living in BC, Canada, where they have been living for 21 years of their life, which happens to be their entire life. I chose them to help me analyze my thesis, which is Canadians are only seen as friendly and polite by foreigners, when in actuality most Canadians hold a norm called clam-up when they do not wish to offend, so people may save face and avoid argument. According to peer-reviewed journal articles, the first of which is called 5 Decades of Class Analysis in Canadian Review of Sociology by Tom Langford, Perceptions of People in Canada, Canada-Born versus Internationally Born, Post-Secondary Student Perspectives by Shreya Packer and Dana Lynch, and The Canadian Cognitive Bias and Its Influences on Canadian-U.S. Relations by Ken Holmes. Most Canadian beliefs seem to be beliefs, norms, and values seem to be much like Americans. Their main belief seems to be freedom. Their values are typically equality and social justice, and their norms tend to be polite, which is one of their more stereotypical beliefs held by foreigners to the Canadian country. Now, in this interview, I went ahead and asked Christopher 14 different questions to get his perspective on these norms and values held by him, and to use his beliefs and his answers to evaluate my thesis. All right, so here with me today is a professional Canadian named Chris. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself? Go ahead and give me your name and your age and where you live and how long you've been living there.
All right, so my name is Christopher Adam. I am 21 years old, and I am from Nanaimo, BC, Canada, which a big island called Vancouver Island, just west of Vancouver. I have lived here pretty much my whole life. I grew up here. I was born here, and about 4 years ago, I moved to Saskatchewan, Canada, for 1 year and absolutely hated it, and so I moved back here with my brother.
All right, then. All right, cool. I picked Chris for this specific thesis since I believe Chris is younger than most adult Canadians, being obviously less than like the median age of an adult. I feel he could give an interesting perspective on this thesis that I have proposed. So we'll go ahead and start with the questions. Chris, if there are any questions you feel are inappropriate or that you don't want to answer for any reason, just let me know. Say I would like not to answer this question, and we will move on. Do you have any comments or concerns or anything before we start?
Nope, that sounds good.
All right, great. Okay, so we'll start with question 1. How often do you get into arguments in your day-to-day life? So this could be just like weekly or monthly. Like, how often would you say you get into a verbal argument?
Probably once a year, I would imagine. Yeah, I don't argue very much, and I try my best not to, but it's probably a thing where it's mostly with my brother. We get into, those brother arguments.
Oh, okay.
So
do these arguments, which is the second question, do these arguments tend to be personal things or social problems?
they probably tend to be more personal things, like as I said, like with my brother, on average, would be we just kind of disagree on something. We're tired of seeing each other because we live together, and then I have a lot of friends who get into arguments about politics and government, stuff like that. But I tend to I'm like, you know what? I don't really care.
All right. In the last 6 months, have you gotten to a heated argument?
Not that I can remember.
All right.
Yeah.
How anxious do you get if you have an argument or some sort of verbal confrontation? Doesn't even have to be an argument, but a point where it's getting sort of out of hand?
I probably do get pretty anxious just because I am a people pleaser, and I will always be kind of on the defensive in an argument. I won't really go and attack somebody.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of like, oh crap, like what do I say? Like, because I like to try and diffuse the situation as quick as possible. I don't like super heated arguments, and yeah.
All right. That's an understandable answer. All right, so question 5, have you ever been in a discussion where you decided it's best to be quiet instead of saying something that might cause an argument?
That's probably a common situation where, like my friend circle, there'll be like a discussion going on, and they might be getting in an argument, or they're talking about something else. And it's just like I will sit there and be quiet because in most conversations, anyways, like if I'm in public, a lot of the time I'm a listener, so
Hmm.
people notice that I don't tend to talk very much because I just try and sit there, listen to the whole situation, and then if it's a matter where somebody's seeking wisdom or something, that's when I'll kind of like step in. I'll
Uh-huh.
be quiet until that point where they ask my opinion or something like that, and I'll try my best to offer it. And if it's an argument, I will try and diffuse it because I am, quote unquote, the peacemaker of my friends. They have called me that before.
All right, so you just like to try and stay out of most of the controversial stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So is saving face important to you? And I know you kind of had to Google this because you didn't exactly know what it means.
Yeah.
I think this is actually more of an American term, to be honest. Now that I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it, but you Googled it and stuff, and I think you have the definition in front of you. So if you need to take a minute, go ahead. But like saving face, is that something you feel is important?
I don't think it, in general, is as important as people make it out to be. Um, I think it's just a human, or it's just human nature to kind of save face. I guess if that's how you can use that term. So, like, because my definition I have here is simply a strategy to avoid humiliation or embarrassment, or to maintain dignity or preserve reputation. And I feel like most people do try and do that as best they can. Nobody likes to be humiliated or embarrassed, or they always want to have a good reputation. Um, I think it is something, if everybody wants to be real with each other
Mhm.
and get into deep conversations about life and just talk with each other, you kind of have to leave that behind. Otherwise, it probably is going to be a fairly shallow conversation either way.
Okay. Yeah, I can totally see that. All right. So let's switch gears a little bit in terms of questions. All right. So question number 7 is, how often do you interact with strangers? And this doesn't have to be arguments or anything. Like, just how often,
Mhm.
somebody you don't even really know, how often do you interact with a stranger?
All day long, or at least days that I work.
Okay. Are these just typically just work days, or are these like day to day, like howdy stranger kind of things?
Most of it's work days because I work in a pawn shop in a fairly large town. It's not a city or anything, but we get a lot of tourists through here, and then a lot of people just randomly stopping into the store, and they're like, "Oh, I've never heard of this place." But probably every day that I work, I probably meet up to like 50 strangers.
Okay. That's a lot of strangers.
Yeah.
All right. So, how often do you interact with people who are foreign to Canada? People not even from your country.
Not a whole lot. I remember a few years ago I was working at a gas station, and some random family from Colorado came and stopped to get gas there. And I remember this because it's like they asked me, the father, they had a bunch of kids, and the father came up to me. He's like, uh, what city are we in? Is this Nanaimo? And I just kind of chuckled, and I'm like, Yeah, no, it's Nanaimo, but yeah, like that's where you are, and a lot of people cannot pronounce the name of my city just without reading it off a piece of paper.
That's a Native American word, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
This is the native culture here in British Columbia is like really strong, and it's present in a lot of like the artwork around here. I get like a lot of totem poles and just stuff like that. Looks like that.
Okay. So besides that family from Colorado, have you ever met anybody from like a European country or maybe an Asian country, just anywhere else that's like totally foreign to
Hmm.
you?
I have, but I think most of those interactions were probably through school. I remember there being a couple of Korean students
Mhm.
that were kind of like foreign exchange students, and I think I met a girl from France once, and then uh, maybe the odd European that kind of resides here now, but like they're from directly from Europe.
Yeah.
My great grandparents were from England,
Okay.
so just kind of stuff like that. Not too often do I come across just some random person who's like fresh out of a different country.
Okay. So, what do you think most foreigners not from Canada think about Canadians?
Well, not to spoil anything coming up ahead, but I feel like uh, the assumption and stereotype of Canadians being very nice and uh, like that's the main one. I think everybody thinks that Canadians are very nice, which compared to the rest of the world, I can definitely see why. um, but I think just sometimes I do meet people who were very serious about the stereotypes of like, do we live in igloos? Do we ride polar bears? I have met people who like legitimately were confused. And I'm like, no, our like Canada is very much like here. Like, yeah, this was down in Washington State. It was pretty funny.
Wow. All right. So, has there ever been an instance where a foreigner has not quite, well, maybe they've offended you, or maybe they've offended something you've believed in? Like somebody just not even from your area?
Yeah. I don't think it's so much a foreigner has ever offended me. Um, the only thing I can really think of for that would be me being a Christian, coming across like stuff online, people commenting back and forth, and
Hmm.
maybe when I was a bit younger, I'd get offended, but like at people just kind of with anti-Christian views or anything like that. Most of the time now, I can see where a lot of people are coming from, and I just it doesn't bother me if somebody believes something different.
Yeah.
Uh, because everybody has their own beliefs to a point, and even within Christianity, there's many different opinions.
Okay, yeah, no, no, there are definitely diverse opinions when it comes to things
Hmm.
like religion. So, okay, so you've had we'll say foreign interactions, but like online or through media of some sort.
Hmm.
Okay, can you give a specific example of that where somebody's not maybe not even from Canada has said something about maybe your culture or your religion or whatever it was, and how you handled that?
Yeah, I think one of the only extreme examples I could think of, like, there's been a lot of just conversations online,
Mm,
and it's just like, oh, I believe this. Oh, you're stupid for believing that. Blah blah blah. Situation ended. Not a big deal. But I remember there's one time. This was actually probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. There was a band that I came across online, and they were playing in a club that was owned by a Christian, and she had like uh, cross on the banner behind them, and like a Satanist band, and they tore it down and were like flipping out, and the mad at them, and I left a comment on this video, um, just kind of sharing my opinion, and then the band actually came back and like found my, or it was on my Facebook. I think I left the thing, but they actually like shared an image of me wearing like a Christian T-shirt and were like bashing me for wearing that, and it was a strange situation I found myself in, but I just kind of ended it there. I didn't go
Wow.
any farther. Yeah, it was weird, definitely weird, and that's probably a one-off. I don't think that's ever really happened
Yeah.
other than that.
Where was that band from? Do you know?
The United States.
Do you, to be honest, okay, so just like a quick follow-up question to that.
Mhm.
If you think that band was Canadian, do you think they would have acted the same way?
uh Probably, because I don't think this really had anything to do with Canadian versus US. Like it was very much a religion topic more so than a nationality topic.
Okay. um all right, so now to get off of that, because that's pretty messed
Yeah.
up, but
Yeah.
all right. So just to switch gears a little bit more, do you believe most Canadians, or at least the ones you know, um, would have acted similarly in that situation where they just wouldn't have retaliated to the Facebook picture
Mhm.
profile sharing? Do you think most Canadians would have just left it, or do you think other people would have acted differently?
I think most Canadians probably would have actually acted differently than me. I think that is a stereotype that probably extends maybe half, or maybe not even half, a quarter of our nation.
Mhm.
I think a lot of Canadians, I know a lot. There are a lot of rude people here, and it's the same all over the world. I think in that respect, there's probably just more nice people here, but a good majority of the people aren't necessarily any different than an American, for example. I think Canada and the U.S. are very, very similar.
In regards to attitude.
At it, yeah, yeah. I think Canada's just a little bit nicer, but not very much.
So not much of a difference.
Yeah,
Kind of like cousins.
pretty much. Yeah, like
Okay.
from my experience going back and forth, like I don't see too much of a difference.
All right. So now here's a question for you. How do you feel about the statement most Canadians are seen as polite when in actuality they just tend to, quote, clam up to avoid confrontation?
I think this kind of goes back to the last answer I just gave, but it's very much the clam up part. I don't know. I feel like not too many people actually tend to do that. I think a lot of people do try and stand up for themselves. In most conversations that I've seen that ended up getting heated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think most Canadians are seen as polite, but in reality, it's very similar to most other places.
Mm-hmm.
And then most that I know don't actually clam up to avoid confrontation.
All right. So that's pretty much the whole interview. But is there anything you would like to add? Like, even if from your experience, maybe to say, maybe Canadians or, just whatever, if anybody sees this, anything you would just like to just say?
Hmm. Let's see. This one I had to think, 'cause I do want to say something, but I think people from all over the world, every nationality, just need to treat each other nicer. I think that would be a nice change. It's like I find 90% of heated arguments or confrontations are started over stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just believe different stuff, or we have a different opinion on stuff like government and politics, and it's an opinion. We don't have to feel like we have to change our whole mindset and lives to fit with what these other people want.
Yeah.
And I think most of those situations probably stem from one of those people trying to force somebody to believe something. And that, I think, in any situation, if somebody's trying to force you to do something, it's just going to end in confrontation, much like a parent trying to get a kid to clean a room. I think most kids argue that they don't want to do it. Yeah. I think that's it.
All right.
People love each other. There you go.
That's the most Canadian thing I've heard. All right. Thank you very much for doing this for me, Chris.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So, in conclusion, a few insights I've gained after conducting the interview is that Canadians seem to at least somewhat identify a little bit with Americans. Chris kept going back to American foreigners, which would probably be the most common foreigner, obviously, to British Columbia, because they are right next to Seattle, obviously. And it seems that Canadians probably aren't that far off in any of their beliefs or their norms or values, since I even stated earlier in the beginning of this project that a lot of it tends to parallel fairly easily with American culture. I guess in the very end of it, Canada is pretty much just the cousin country of America, possibly what could have been America, and it's not a bad thing. Canadians seem to hold a communication style with Americans, especially when it comes to the thesis about the clam up part. It seems that Chris himself would clam up a little bit, but most people in his society and his culture and Canadian culture probably wouldn't. And I feel that's pretty much the same with Americans. As to how this will help me communicate more competently in an intercultural context, I feel that it gives me a little insights that other countries may not be so different when it comes to the communication type. At least not Western countries. Now, Eastern countries, probably a little different. But when it comes to Western countries, so the Americas or even Europe, I feel that it's probably pretty much the same. People pretty much have the same communication style and probably think the same way, because a lot of us kind of have, even in our histories, a connection to that European communication style, which most American countries have in common. Anyways, this was my communications project, which I use for intercultural competence and interpersonal relationships. Thank you very much for watching.